So at 5 o'clock this morning, when I'm getting ready to go to work, my wife and I were talking about George Floyd from Minnesota. It's been I'm sure for many people, it's been a topic of conversation for at least the past 3 days. It's sickening. The whole ordeal is sickening. That man did not deserve to suffer for 7 minutes lying on the ground. At this point, I don't really care what he was supposedly charged with, under suspicion of. That's not the job of the police to administer punishment. That is not what they're paid to do. They're paid to keep the peace, and those 4 men, I only saw 2 men in the video, but the news is saying that 4 were fired. They were not keeping the peace. They were disrupting the peace. We're taught our entire lives how great this country is and freedom. And I was raised as a Christian, and we're taught to love and to do missionary work. And this is supposedly a Christian nation, founded on Christian, Judeo-Christian values. How is this acceptable? It was never acceptable. But especially now, our country is divided almost 50-50 on lines of red and blue. How can we survive any more lines of division based on color? We can't. I would pray and I would beg people to stand up and be Americans and support Americans. To those people that videoed this for 7 minutes, why didn't you do something? The people sitting in that restaurant looking out the window, why didn't you do something? In 7 minutes, you can weigh all of the options. What's the worst that can happen to you? Okay, you could have been tased. But if you'd have just stepped across that line and made that officer feel uncomfortable, he would have stood up and grabbed his gun. And that would have been enough time for George Floyd to draw a breath. You would have saved his life. You might have gotten tased. You might have served 6 months to a year in jail. But you would have saved a man's life. Is that not what Jesus would do? Is that not what Thomas Jefferson would do? Dwight Eisenhower? Abraham Lincoln? Do you think that they would tolerate, in front of God and everybody, a man handcuffed on the ground begging for breath? I cannot say for sure about Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln or Dwight Eisenhower, but I can with almost 100% certainty, guarantee you, Jesus would not have tolerated that. Cast the first stone, ye that be without sin. Why, as Christians and Americans, do we continue to tolerate this behavior? And why does the news and the media continue to say things like a white officer and a black man? Why couldn't it just be an officer and a man? Yes, there are ethnic differences. It's more of a product of raising, of your upbringing, than it is of the color of your skin. Excuse me. It's sickening. People are brave enough to drive a ship into another ship to save a whale. But you won't take 2 steps to save another human being? Instead of Black Lives Matter, lives matter. Peace matters. Respect matters. I see these bumper stickers that say critical thinking our other national deficit. Respect and bravery are our national deficits. Did you know that in self-defense classes for women, they teach you to yell fire instead of for help because no one will respond to help? How fucking sick is that? To the men out there, what kind of man are you? It's your job. It's why you were born, is to run when someone says help. To the sound of help, not away. Look at it at a purely biological standpoint. You are a man. You are not as necessary for the survival of a species. I'm sure there'll be a lot of arguments for that, but I've had enough. For those of you that videoed that, and those of you that watched that from the comfy seats of that restaurant, I hope you have nightmares the rest of your life, because I will. And I was 1,000 miles away. I've been in Minnesota. It's like a 13-hour drive. And 3 days after I watched the video for the first time, I can sit here and talk to this camera, to this phone, and hear that man begging for his breath. It was not a crime of passion, a moment of fear. There's no excuse. He didn't just draw his gun in the seconds that it takes to fire a gun for 7 minutes. He had his knee on that man's neck. There's no excuse for that. There is no call for that. There is no reason. You cannot come up with any excuse other than that officer was a sick, sick man and should not have been an officer. That, I might add, is the result of being able to be a police officer after 9 weeks of BLET training. Did you know that it takes 4.5 years to become an electrician? We should expect more of our government employees because they represent us. We should hold them to a higher standard. There should be no tolerance for failure. Pay them a little more and expect a lot more, and fire their ass if they do not deliver. That's how you get quality people in important positions. High expectations, high pay, and you bring the world down on their ass if they do not perform. Sick of it. I'm sick of watching my country that I love so much be torn apart. That's all I've got to say.